Hello, everybody. Good day, good night, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day it is for you. Welcome, welcome. My name is Nim. I'm the technical evangelist here at Kintone, and today we've got an exciting session for you. We're going to be talking about React today. We're going to be connecting it to a web database. It's going to be awesome. If you haven't followed the instructions on the slides, wherever I don't quite know where my video is relative to the screen, so I'm just going to point whatever way it is, and go ahead, start following the instructions on the screen. There's a link that's going to connect you to our GitHub repo for our content today. So go ahead and clone that repo. Go ahead and get started on that so that command starts executing in the background as we're talking. If you have not done so already, please go ahead and sign up for your Kintone developer account. This is a free account that you're going to need in order to get moving with us today. So make sure you follow the instructions over there, and also set up a Kintone subdomain, which the link is also on the slide that we're in today. So to get started, we already pointed you to the link to that GitHub repo. If you need, you're going to run these commands from your terminal, git clone with that URL. I believe Genji, can you go ahead and drop that information in the chat again? I probably already did. Awesome. So Genji is going to hook you up with those links. We're going to use this repo as a starting point. Oops. And then once you download that repo, you're not out of the woods yet. In fact, we're just getting into the woods. You're going to create you're going to move into the front end folder. So you'll have downloaded the repo. You're going to go into the React Workshop by Kintone folder, and then the front end folder, and then you're going to npm install in the front end. That's going to take a few minutes in order to resolve. So you can get that started while it's going on in the background. Ujjwal, I see that you've got something in the chat. Genji is going to give you a hand with that. So when you sign up for a Kintone developer account, do not use Safari. Make sure that you've set cookies to be accepted, and ideally you want to use Chrome and Firefox. You'll fill in your full name and your email. You'll sign up for a developer account if you do not already have one with us, and then from there you can create a Kintone subdomain. You'll hit it up at this link. Make sure you just use alphanumeric characters to create your subdomain. And your subdomain is going to be whatever you type in, .kintone.com, like weekend-hacker at .kintone.com, or coffee4life.kintone.com. My name is Nim. I'm the technical evangelist at Kintone. My job today is to help show you what's possible with React and with our platform, that you can create a lightweight front end. You can connect it to a lightweight back end. You can connect that lightweight back end to a web database called Kintone. Kintone is a lot more than a web database. It's a pretty special application. We're all very proud to work for this company, and we think we're gonna, by showing you how to do the soup to nuts, you're gonna learn something and it's gonna be valuable for you. I wanna call it again my developer advocates, who are going to be like my right hand and my left hand today, Nikki and Genji. Would you both please raise your hand? And do you want to say anything? Introduce yourself, or tell our friends today what they're going to be in for.
Hey guys, my name is Nikki. You guys are in for a great learning session, and I am so excited to be here to help you guys. So if you have any questions at all, please go ahead and drop them in the chat, and Genji and I will take care of you as soon as we can. Genji said thumbs up. If anyone didn't see that.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Genji, did we get your favorite fruit?
It's of course mango.
It's a mango. I feel like I was hoping somebody over here would say durian, and then we would get into like a flame war about durian, maybe even durian versus mangosteen, the self-ascribed kings and queens of fruit. But I think a mango is a very safe answer, Genji. Nikki, how about you?
I said cherries and peaches.
Oh, that was you.
Right.
Cherries and peaches.
Yeah, not quite as tropical.
Yeah, and I'm not quite as much of a fan of those two. So, we're going to have to work that out after we wrap today. All right. That's not what you're here You're here for React and REST APIs. Let's talk about getting and posting data to a web database. All right, so this is what we're going to be making today. We've got a front end. It's a front end that's got the React framework all up in there. We're going to be rendering data, and that data is going to come from our web service called Kintone. And the routing between the front end and the web service will be handled by a backend server. So we'll be accessing the backend server from our front end. The backend server will be fetching data and then passing it back to the front end. And then we will also be posting that data. So we'll be configuring a user input section in there as well. So what we're going to make today, what you're seeing right now is the Kintone backend. And or the Kintone web service, and it acts as a database. It's got records in it. Those records are being displayed over here in front of us. We've got a list of those records presented on our React app, and what we're doing right now is adding form data. That form data is getting pushed into our backend server. That backend server is routing that data, that payload to Kintone, and then it came back to us and was re-rendered in React. Okay, so again. If you haven't already downloaded the repository, go ahead and do that right now. And if you have, and you have not already spun up your code editor, go ahead and do that. We're going to use VS Code over here.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are we able to set it to our own repository? Is that okay?
Oh, like yeah. So what you can do is you can fork Genji's repository. And so what you'll do is you'll fork that. You'll fork that repo, and then you can git clone your fork. And then what you can do is you can git push, you can commit, and then you can git push origin main to your own repository. Does that answer your question?
Oh, okay. Yes, that's very helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. That actually, it's a pretty good best practice. If there's somebody else's code that you want to play with, you can always fork their repository and then clone it onto your local machine, and then have that remote local relationship between your own repo and your local machine.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it. Folks, what we're going to do next is we want to make sure that you've got the right versions of Node and NPM before this roller coaster gets rolling. So what you can do real quick is in your terminal, node-v, npm-v, you're checking the versions of these two commands. And we want to make sure that you're running node greater than 10.16 and npm greater than 5.6. If you are running versions of node or npm that are earlier than that, then you can go ahead and check out the companion video. You can also check out the README. There's a section on installing node.js and npm. All right, now at this point in time, if you for some reason don't already have a terminal open, now is the time to open the terminal. You're going to go to the React Workshop by Kintone folder, and actually you're going to open up multiple tabs in your terminal. One is going to be for the front end, one is going to be for the back end. And if you have not already started your front end npm install, go ahead and kick that off immediately. It's going to take a few minutes to get rolling. Do that first. And then you can go ahead to the backend folder and npm install on your backend. You can even type in npm I, and that's just a shorthand for the install command. npm install, what that's going to do is going to read your package.json file that you just pulled down that's in this repo, and it's going to use that package.json file as like a recipe list, and it'll go to the node package manager, to npm, and it'll say, hey, I'm looking for a grocery list. Sorry, that's what I was saying. It'll be like, I'm looking for these items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you'll be using npm to download all of those node modules onto your local machine in the node modules folder of your project. As that's moving, well, let's take a look at our repo. Okay, so the repo that you should have downloaded has this project directory folder. Make sure you open it up in VS Code or whatever your preferred code editor is. I'll be referring to VS Code this whole time. And what you should see is two folders underneath this React Workshop by Kintone folder. These subdirectories are backend and front end, respectively. Front end is where we will be doing our React work. Backend is where we will be playing with our routing, our intermediary backend server that will be doing the routing. Okay, backend should have two files in it: .env.example, which is where we will be holding the environmental variables and making sure we don't push them to GitHub if we're going to be interfacing with our own forked versions of the repo. And then server.js, which we will be getting our hands down and dirty with as well. In front end, there's a public folder. It may have some additional files. What you need to worry about is just the index.html file. That's important for the code, but we won't be doing anything with it. It's just there. And then in the source folder, we've got app.js, index.js, and two other subdirectories for components and requests. Some of those files might be, for the most part, empty, like input form.js and postrecord.js. We'll be filling them out later. Don't you worry about it. So the directory structure looks a little bit like this. And let me also give you a little bit of a map of what you're looking at. Okay, so if it's a yellow, so in this, if the file is like a yellow circle, then it's handling API calls between the front end through the back end and to the Kintone web database. Okay, so API call handling is server.js, get records, and post record. The components, well, if it's a green rectangle, these are React components that are making up the front end. And that purple rhombus over here, I don't know if that's purple or pink, magenta. That magenta rhombus over there is an environmental file that's going to hold your Kintone credentials. And you're going to want to make sure you don't accidentally upload that to your forked repository if you're working with a forked repository. Okay, so again, these are the files we're going to be touching. All of the starred ones. We'll be building stuff in there. And at this point in time, the roller coaster is about to leave the station. So before we leave the station, we're going to do a quick check-in using the Zoom poll. And we just want to let you know first, we just want to know from you, first of all, checking in. Are you experiencing any issues? Could be the audio is not good. It could be you arrived late. Could be I'm speaking too fast. If I am, I don't take that personally. Just tell me, I'll slow down. We've got a lot of material that we want to cover, and I'm very excited. So I have a bias toward talking faster than may be helpful if that's an issue. Second is we want to know which of the following topics are you interested in learning. So this is for our future reference because we want to build content that's valuable for you. So folks, as we are hanging out today, in the next 30 to 60 seconds, please go ahead and fill out those two questions. Just real quick on the multiple choice. How are you doing? Are you experiencing any issues? And which of the following topics are you most interested in learning? So great. Thank you if you've already filled that out so far. You're in great shape. Everybody else who hasn't filled it out, the window is rapidly closing. So go ahead and fill this out. Matthew, I see you just sent me a message. Go ahead and reach out to Genji or Nikki, and they may be able to assist you more. For anybody else who has any specific questions, again, Genji and Nikki are your people to talk to. Great. Again, if you haven't filled out that quick check-in, you can go ahead and fill out the poll right now. We'll give you another 10 seconds to do that, and then we'll keep moving. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, Akshata. So Akshata is interested in all of the topics mentioned in the poll. So Genji, would you mind just taking that down? Chris is asking, where do we clone the project from? Nikki, can you give Chris a hand with that? And we're going to keep moving. Okay, so let's go over Kintone so you know what tools we'll be using in this build and why. So Kintone is a no-code, low-code cloud platform for teams to easily share and collaborate on their data efficiently. So you can imagine that for most people in their day-to-day experience of work, they're capturing data in some kind of a database or some kind of a spreadsheet or an out-of-the-box solution, whatever that is. And and they've got to track that data as it moves through various kinds of workflows, or for whatever, or to do reporting, or for whatever business reasons people need to track data. But then they're also talking about the data, and they might be talking about that in email or Slack or text message or voicemails or phone calls or wherever it is that people have conversations. And the challenge is that a lot of that stuff is spread out. So what makes Kintone special is that you've got the data and the conversations about the data all in one place. So, this data can live in multiple places. These conversations can live in multiple places. When you can put that together, and you've got a way to remove the friction in the day-to-day experience of work. So what's possible then becomes like flow and ease, and without needing to scatter to like many different places to find what you're looking for. It turns out that the average knowledge worker spends like 20% of their week just looking for stuff. It's like an entire day out of your work week just looking for things. So when you remove or reduce that overhead, life becomes easy or easier. And that's really what's beneficial for the business people that use Kintone. They can create workflows with process management so that the right people are seeing the right things at the right time. So you can imagine like expense reporting, legal document reviews, a hiring process. Like an expense report can be submitted by the user and then approved by their manager before being sent to accounting. These are some common use cases in just any business. And the way that the tracking happens is inside something called an app. The main building block of Kintone is an app. And you can imagine an app as a powerful online table where data is stored in records. So imagine like a souped up version of a spreadsheet or a table with more benefits. And what's nice about Kintone apps is that they're very easy to create. So if you are allergic to technology, which I doubt anybody on this call is allergic to technology, and if you're already a trained software engineer with lots and lots of years of experience, you can create these apps, this data schema, with a drag and drop interface. So if you lack a technological background, you can do something that wasn't possible before for you. If you already have a technical background, you can do things way faster than you did before. And so everyone gets to contribute. And as a developer, as an engineer, you can also enhance apps with client-side JavaScript. And this is where things begin to get interesting as somebody who's interested in software engineering or who's involved in software engineering in some way. Ultimately, again, the big picture is you're able to fulfill the promise of groupware, getting people together to collaborate on shared items of interest, on shared concerns, and then being able to disseminate those insights and have them become operationalized quickly. So you've got the data, you've got the conversations about the data, and then you can flow into action a lot faster. So where do developers fit in on all this? Well, I started to talk about JavaScript enhancements. There are actually two main ways that developers can build stuff on Kintone. So the first is as like a command center, where you create a custom look and feel. You integrate the tool with other third-party web applications to exchange data. You can pipe data into and out of the system or have it sit as a presentation layer on top of other data warehouses. You can create enhancements like these client-side client-side executable JavaScript code that expands native functionality, or you can build and share extensions, which you can imagine as like Chrome extensions, things that users can download and then configure to extend the functionality of the platform without needing to know how to code. Inside of Kintone, you've got a lot of different tools to make that happen. There's an open, a freely available REST API and a JavaScript API. We've got API tokens and webhooks, plugins. You can customize the JavaScript, the HTML, the CSS, and have a lot of granularity with permission controls. So when we talk about a custom look and feel, we're really serious about that. I mean, Will has done a great little build here with Space Invaders. So this is on the right-hand side. You can play Space Invaders with Kintone. That's how flexible the platform is. And on the left-hand side, there's a data visualization over here called Bubble Cloud that you're seeing. As somebody who's interested in improving your abilities, Kintone's helpful for you to learn new JavaScript or contribute what you've learned to tech blogs, to position yourselves in the industry, to share projects with your community. And if you're looking at it from a more business direction, like, hey, I want to use my skills to make money, well, then you can create revenue in Kintone by selling Kintone extensions, by consulting with firms on achieving business goals, and developing Kintone customizations for customers. Okay, I'm sharing with you again this background about Kintone so that you have a big picture understanding of the tool that you're using. Tanya's asking, does it work like WordPress? It's a completely different kind of tool. So WordPress is like a very easy way for non-coders to build static websites. And Kintone is like an internal platform for collaboration for teams. And you can build apps on it. Apps are again like souped up spreadsheets, souped up tables and databases. And so what you've got over here is like in essence, it's a web database that you use to store data and have that data talk to other web applications. Okay. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to explore the code. And we're going to do three things with the code. First is we're going to talk about connecting your Kintone subdomain. Then we're going to learn what's going on over here. And then finally, we'll learn how React works over here. So the first thing that I want to do is drop this down over here. Let me just get a quick thumbs up from you folks. You can do like a visual thumbs up if you're on video. Can you see my screen? Can you see the VS code that I've got over here? Let me just get a quick thumbs up. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And the first thing that we're looking at is in my backend folder. Okay. So in my backend folder, you'll see I've got I have npm installed in my backend folder, and I've got a server.js, I've got a package.json, and a package lock.json, and a node modules folder. And then I've got something called .env.example. So the first thing we want to do is we want to connect your Kintone subdomain, because we're going to be the backend server, that routing server is going to be accessing information over there. Hold on just 1 second, folks. You know what we're going to do? We're going to, so you see, okay, there are three variables that we're going to need in order to hook into our Kintone environment. The name of our subdomain, the app ID, and the API token. What I'm going to do at this point is we're going to go into your Kintone subdomain, and I'm going to show you where you can find those things and what is the first app that we're going to be using to get those things. So folks, hold on just 1 second. And Kintone is a platform as a service. That's right. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Akin or Akin? Yeah, Kintone is a platform as a service. Okay, folks. What I'd like you to do at this point is I'd like you to log into your Kintone subdomain. The subdomain is whatever you've named it as. So for example, I'm going to be using a subdomain called devevents.com. You're going to use a different subdomain. That and you'll see it over here in your browser tab. Here we are, devevents.kintone.com. So you're going to take that dev events or whatever it is for you, and you're going to, here's what you're going to do. You're going to clone your .env.example in your backend, and you're going to name this one .env. Okay, this is going to be the real one. That other one's just an example. And then you'll put in your subdomain over here. Okay. So when you log into Kintone, you'll enter into an environment that looks similar to this. Yours will be empty. Over here, we've just created apps already and some spaces as well. You can imagine like a space is like a zone where you have conversations about your data, and also apps can live there as well. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to create your first app, and you're going to do that by clicking on this plus sign over here. There are many different ways that you can create apps. You can create them from scratch. You can import an Excel or CSV. You can use an existing template. We're going to create an app from scratch. Go ahead and click on Create App from Scratch. And when you do, you'll be taken to our form builder page. You'll notice there is a canvas on the right-hand side, a palette on the left-hand side. And what you're going to do is you're going to drag your fields from the palette to the canvas, like so. Okay. We're going to create a very, very simple. We're going to create a very simple app. We'll call it Books. So you'll click on where it says New App. You can click on that name. You click on that title, New App, and just type in Books. And then you'll drag and drop two text fields in over here. The first one is we're going to call that title. And what I'd like you to do, please pay close attention to this part. This is very important. You're going to create the name title, but then at the bottom, there's something called a field code. This is the unique field identifier that our code is going to need to refer to get this information. And so we're going to call this title, the lowercase t. Then we'll click Save. And we're going to do something very similar for that second text box. We're going to create an author text field. So name it author, and then again, very, very important, that field code is going to be author, the lowercase a. Okay, we've got two fields in one app. You're going to hit Save Form, and then you're going to click Activate App. Very important. Click on that blue button, Activate App. And so your app will be, you'll having created this app, it'll be an empty app. Okay. This is exactly what we expect to see. Like I said, an app is like a table with like more souped up stuff. So we've got a table here with two fields, two columns, title and author. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a few records. Okay. So you'll click on this plus sign over here. We're going to start populating our app with some sample data. So we'll click on this new record, and the title will be whatever book you want, and you'll add a few records over here, and then you can click the plus sign. You can add another record, and what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to add 2 or 3 records. Okay, not more than that. Now, I called it Books, but actually Genji's created a MangaDB for us to use. Genji, my apologies to you. I'm just not as into manga. So what's important for the folks at home is you're going to create an app. You're going to populate it with some sample records. And when you are in when you are in the app, you'll notice there's a number over here in the URL. The number over here for us is 30. Your number might be a different number. It's probably going to be 1. This is the first app you've ever built. That's your app ID. Could be 1, it could be 20, whatever it is. That number that goes immediately after the k/, that's your app ID. That's going to go in your environmental variables. So right over here is where you're going to see it, okay? So for us, we're going to use app ID 30, and that's what we're going to use. Kent, I got that reference. No, it's not MongoDB, it's MangaDB, but I'm picking up what you're putting down. Okay, so we've got our subdomain, we've got our API, we've got our app ID. Now we need the API token. All right, we're gonna go back into our app over here. And remember how I said Kintone is like an app is like a table, but with more benefits. It's got more power to it. We're going to create an API token right now to access this specific app, and we're going to do that by going to this gear wheel over here. And we're going to click on the caret, and you'll be and go down to the section that's called customization and integration. And there's an option over here in the menu bar for API token. Go ahead and click on that. If you click on the gear wheel, no problem. I'm going to show you how to get to your API tokens from the gear wheel. You'll be in this back end right over here. You'll see there are 4 tabs: form, views, graphs, app settings. Click on app settings. And then you'll go to the API token over here. Now we need to generate an API token, so we can go ahead, you'll click generate. And then you'll give it specific permissions. In this case, we want to view and add records. Now, I actually already have an existing API token that's set to view and add records. I'm going to reuse that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click to highlight that API token. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it right over here. Now, I want to acknowledge this video is being recorded. This API token, it's very bad practice to have an API token live and accessible to the whole internet. So for those of you who are watching closely, make sure, again, this is the reason why we don't push environmental variables up to GitHub. In fact, if you have a git ignore file set up, if you don't, you can set one up later. But you'll typically have your .env file be included as part of your .git ignore, so that you can exclude that file when your repo is pushed up from your local machine to your remote machine. For our purposes today, you guys see this API token. We're going to change it later. No big deal. But for you to know, this is just a practice to be very, very thoughtful about. Okay. So the thing that you do once you've copied that API token is you need to save this. You can't just leave the screen. You've got to click on that blue save button. And once you do, you've got to then click on that blue update app button. Very, very important with Kintone. Basically, you can imagine every time you make backend changes to your Kintone app, you've got to push the changes into a staging environment and push the changes to production. You can imagine it like that. So your staging environment is you save the whatever settings you got, and then when you push the change to production, that's when you hit that blue update app at the corner of the screen right over here. Okay, you can drive yourself nuts if you didn't update the app and the expected behavior is that it should work. It isn't working because you need to make sure that you're operating in the same environment that you're expecting. So you'll click on this button, update app. Okay, at this point, you should have a subdomain. You should have an app ID. You should have an API token. You should have all of those. You should have updated your app. You should have 2 to 3 records in your app. Please pull out the record number field. I did not say this before. This is my bad, folks. I'm sorry for any confusion this may have caused. Okay. In your form builder, go into your form builder and pull out the record number field at almost all the way at the bottom on the left-hand side, and drag and drop it And then in the settings, in the field settings, you're going to change the field code from record underscore number to record ID, just like I wrote it, capital I, capital D. Record and then capital I, capital D, record ID. This is going to be the unique identifier for this record, which we will be using later on the React side as a way to uniquely identify the items in a list for the rendering. Thanks for calling that out, Ken. You definitely want to get rid of the underscore. It's record ID specifically, and we'll go ahead and we'll update the app. And again, I apologize for any confusion on that end. This is another visually pleasing field that we drag and drop from the left to the right. But for somebody who's never seen this before, this is just noise. So we're going to do it.
So much.
You're very welcome. And what you can do, you can drop them all on the same line. And let's just keep it very simple, okay?
All right.
Parna is asking, how do I go back to the form builder from the records window? You're going to click on that gear wheel on the right-hand side of the page, and it's the gear wheel with a white background. It's got a little down arrow, a down caret right next to it. Okay. Can you recap the steps we need to be at? Absolutely. So where you should be so far, you've created a Kintone subdomain. You've added that subdomain name to your .env file, which you've created as a separate file from .env.example. Okay? You created a Kintone app. You added 2 fields to it called title and author. For both of those, I'm sorry, and a third field which you grabbed, which was the record number. For title and author and record number, you've changed all of the field codes. Title will be title all lowercase, author will be author all lowercase, and record number, the record number field will be record ID with I and D both capital. You will have then created an API key. That API key should have permissions for adding and viewing records. Subdomain dev events is the same for all. No, this is my demo account. Your subdomain Akshata will be different. It'll be whatever it was that you typed in to create your Kintone environment. It might be like akshata.kintone.com or iamawesome.kintone.com, whatever it was for you. Okay. So you've created your API key and you're viewing and adding records. Those are the permissions you've set. You've copied that API key. You've added it to your environmental variable file. You've copied your app ID. It's the number immediately after the K. Very good, Kent. You're tracking with me. You're inside of your app called books or MangaDB or whatever you created that has title and author. That number, that's going to become your app ID. And you've updated the app, so all of these changes have propagated, and you've created 2 to 3 records with title and author. Put your favorite book and your favorite author, and then put another, your least favorite title and author, whatever you like. The record number field will be automatically populated. Those are the unique IDs for each record. Right?
So I just need some help getting the app ID. Wasn't sure where to find that.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see? Are you in the view inside of your app where you're looking at your list of records? Yeah, it should be 1. If this is your first Kintone app, it'll be the number 1. That's your app ID.
Okay.
You'll drop that right over here. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to get into the code. We're going to do this. Let's do the fun part. Let's talk about server.js. So we've got this Kintone environment that we just built with an app where we've created our data schema. And now what we want to do is we want to be able to route information to that data schema. And we do that with an express server. So we've built some initial routing so far. And what we've done over here, we've gone ahead and we've imported various parts of our server that we need. So first, we're going to use we're going to use Express. We're going to require cores. Cores is a module that handles something called cross-origin resource sharing. And what you need to know about cross-origin resource sharing is that it basically is a security module that makes sure that if you're at a site like google.com and you're interacting with that any client-side interactions on that site will be to that site and not elsewhere. So if I'm visiting google.com, I would expect that all of my API requests will be to google.com and not to, say, xkcd.com. The cores module handles that behavior for us when we're building stuff with our local environment with localhost. We also are going to use a module called node.fetch, which will allow us to do basic get calls to the server. And then this requiring .env basically allows us to hide our environmental variables in a separate file, which is what we did the setup for. Then these lines, 14 through 16, are pulling information from that environmental variable, and we'll be using them shortly to set up our routing. We're going to parse incoming requests with JSON payloads, which is what this line is. And then we're setting up the cross-origin resource sharing and establishing that our localhost environment, which is where the React development server gets spun up, this is going to be considered our origin. We're getting to the point now where we're starting to build the routing behavior. That cross-origin resource, those cores options are going to be something that we're going to use on our header for those API calls. We're also going to want to set up parameters because we're going to be getting records and posting a record. So when we get records, Kintone will want to know how you want those records arranged, how you want them ordered by, and so that's what this query is. This is a query we'll be passing on to Kintone so it knows how to order how to order its response. And then you'll see we've got two endpoints over here. Only one of them is currently being used, and that's the multiple records endpoint. That's for getting records. And then we've got something here called single record endpoint, which is for posting a record. Well, we haven't built post routing over here yet, but we will. And when we do, we'll use it. Okay. And then it comes with a URL, which you'll notice is passing in your subdomain, your app ID, and the parameters into this template string. And then we've got this get request over here. So this get request is going to live at this route. So the server is expecting behavior, is listening on this route, and when it receives this information, when a request from our front end hits the routing server at this endpoint, then we're going to do the following behavior. We're going to fetch, we're going to issue a get request to the multiple records endpoint with the following fetch options, which will indicate this is a get method, and we're going to be passing along our API token. We'll await a response, and that response will be a JSON response. And so that routing behavior is sitting there waiting, but we need to turn on the waiting behavior. And so that's what lines 54 through 56 are, that we're listening at this port for these, we're listening at this port for behavior. Okay, so that's what's happening at server.js. Now let's talk about what's happening on the front end. And we're going to start with the entry point of our source code. By default, React will look to a page called index.js as your as the entry point for it to like expand and look at all the different bits and bytes of code and the other files that you're importing from. What you see in index.js is very simple. We're importing the React module and the React DOM module. We're importing something called app, which looks strangely like an HTML element, but there's no HTML element called app with a capital A. And then we've got this behavior over here. We're on the React DOM, which is like a virtual DOM that sits on top of the real DOM, where React does all of its stuff before modifying the actual DOM. We're going to render the following stuff, and we're going to do it at an element ID of root. Now, I encourage you to verify this for yourself. In index.html, somewhere in there is an element, it's a div with an ID of root. That is where all of React's behavior is going to be hanging off of. And so what we have over here are these things that are called components. A component you can imagine is like a pretend HTML element. We use React to create components that function for our purposes as though we were coding HTML elements, but actually secretly they're functions. We have an app component over here, and it's being imported from app.js. And so we're in app.js right now, and we want to take a look at some of the behavior that's happening over here. Okay. And so let's take a look at what's happening. We're importing React and two specific functions called useState and useEffect. And then we're importing a getRecords function, and we're importing two other components. By the way, you can tell for our notation purposes, you can tell what is you can tell what a component is because we've capitalized it. And typically components will be like nouns, and requests will be verbs. So we're getting records, we're posting a record. This should be records list or just form, but for our purposes, what you see over here is what we're going to use. We've already have some of this behavior set up. So inside of this app component, which I said secretly is a function, we need to show some HTML. And so that's what we're returning over here. We're returning a div with, well, it's another component called the records list, the list records component, okay? Now you can start to see how React works. React works by building components inside of other components. And then we need to figure out how data moves around so that we can understand our code more effectively. What we need to know right now is app is pretty simple. This is what it looks like. And what you could do is inside of your terminal, you can npm start inside of your front end and be taken to your development server to see what we're rendering right now. And what you'll see is something that looks like this. It'll say React, and it'll say now loading. Again, you can do this by typing into your terminal npm start. And when you do that, then the magic of React, of the create React app package, specifically the npm package called create-react-app, that will spin up a Chrome tab, or they'll spin up a browser tab called that'll have your development server up and running. Please make sure you've also spun up your backend server as well. When you do that inside of your terminal, you'll see this is what it looks like when you've compiled your front end. This is what it looks like when you've compiled your backend right over here. Sorry, I say compiled. I meant when you execute the npm start function and you run your React development server and you run you turn on the routing server to be listening. Both front end and back end with npm start. Yes, Kent, you'll go into your front end folder, npm start. You'll go into your back end folder, npm start. React scripts is not recognized as an internal or external command. Parna, you probably need to npm install npm. My autocorrect keeps changing npm to nom, but n and then p and then m and then install, and then it'll recognize the commands. There's more stuff that's happening over here. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. I just want you to see for now how components nest inside of other components, and ultimately they all get rendered. So we've got a list records component as well. We can go into our components. Yes, Parna, npm install. I typed it in all caps so that autocorrect won't fix me, but you don't need it in all caps. You can have it in all lowercase. And you will do that in your front end and your back end. Okay, localhost 5000 is running. Excellent, Kent. Okay, so let's take a look at the code. Inside of this app.js component, we have this other component called list records. Let's go check out what list records is all about. There's a components folder. We're going to go into the list records component over here. And what we see is, hey, this is another component. It's actually a function, and it's returning some HTML fragment, like a template. And what it's returning is React app followed by something called props.list. And there's a parameter over here called props. Well, if you don't know what that's about, that's totally fine. It's what we're going to get into. And it's going to be, and this is where the magic of React happens. But what I want to show you before we get into how props and state and all this React stuff handles, I want to show you how this renders. Look, we have the words React app over here as an H1 in an H1 tag, which you see over here. And then there's something called props.list, which probably in some way corresponds to now loading, but we're not sure how or why, and we're going to get into that. I'd like to go back to app.js. Okay, and what you'll see, show the two terminals. So here you go. These are my two terminals, by the way, folks. This is my terminal with the front end. So what I've done is I've typed in npm start, and then I've hit enter, and it shows me this inside of front end. And then inside of back end, inside of my back end folder, I've typed in npm start, and then it kicks off this command to listen on localhost 5000. Okay. Cannot get slash. I think Genji can help you with that one. Okay, Ken? So again, inside of your React workshop by Kintone, you'll cd into your front end, and then you're going to npm start. Again, I've already started that command, but you hit enter, and then you'll go into your back end, and you'll do the same thing. All right. We're ready to start learning how React works. We're about to hit the magic of React, okay? So you can see there's something called a component. A component is secretly a function, but you can think of it like an HTML element, like something that looks a lot like HTML. In fact, it's like a fake. It's like a way of creating pretend HTML elements. Kent, no, you're gonna Kent, you're gonna go to you should npm start in your front end, Kent. And when you npm start in your front end, there should be a browser tab that will spin up that will get you to localhost 3000. You should have localhost 3000 for your React development server and localhost 5000 for your routing server, your backend server. And so you need both of those things turned on. Vasilio says, I would use 2 separate terminals for npm start on front end and back end. And then I clicked on front end logos. Vasilio, that is the missing piece over here. Thanks so much for adding that in, man. Was I did not npm, I ran npm start and then I saved my environmental variable file. So let's see if that helps. Here I am now loading. We're going to restart the React server. There we go. Yeah. So if you're just getting a now loading and you're getting no other errors, or rather, if your backend server just looks like this and there's no other like text that looks like it blew something up, then all you got to do is save your environmental variable file and you'll be good to go. So there's some get behavior that we're seeing over here. So now I've got this list, right? This like these list items and this you know, these props.list. Something's going on over here. I'm not sure what. useEffect is basically like component div. Now, yeah, it's basically like that, Christopher. Kent, I need to seed. Save. You'll if you've typed in your environmental variables, and you got to save that file. Kedar, specified field record ID is not found. So Kedar, what's going on with you is you got to go back to your Kintone environment, okay? And then you're going to go into the form builder, and in this record number, you're going to pull out the record number field if you have not done so already. And then you will go to the field settings, and you're going to change this field code from, it used to be record underscore number. You're going to change it to record ID. That's how you're going to fix that issue. Okay, great. So let's start talking about React. Let's talk about what's going on with this component and this this behavior. So what you'll notice is we've got this thing that looks like an HTML attribute. Okay, this is actually called props. Okay, because this is not an HTML element. This is a fake element. This is a React component. A React component, if it needs data, then then either it's going to have the data stored in the component itself, or it will be receiving data from some other component. Genji's going to go ahead and give you a hand with how do you save in Kintone. Okay, so back to React. So if I'm in React, I've got these components and they need to interact with data in some way. They're either going to be storing data in the component itself, or they will be receiving data from some other component. That component actually will always be a parent component. And so data in React, this is very important and critical to an understanding of how React works. Data flow in React always goes from the top down. We're always passing data from the parent components to the child components. Never goes up, right? And then how do we handle the data? Well, inside of a component, if I'm storing data in my component, I'm going to store it in something called state. State is the like it handles like the different buckets of data that need storage, and it tracks. And React hooks a lot of behavior into stuff happening when that data in your state changes over time. Well, in this list records component, I don't have any state. This list records component is receiving the state from its parent component, and it's going to receive it. It's going to be passed down through the props. So I've got this fake HTML element with this fake HTML attribute, right? So I've got a React component with props, and those props get passed in as parameters to the list records function / component. And then the props are an object. okay? And I've got whatever I've named like as keys to that object. They're going to be list. List is the name, is the key for that props, and then it passes down list items. And so what I've got over here is like a template placeholder for me to pass my props down. And then my props are, I've got a list of records, which is what I see over here. Now, you may be wondering, how did I get that list items? How do we started with now loading, and then we moved to this list items. What happened over here? Well, the state, that has to do with our data flow and with our state in the app component, right? And what we did was we created a state which was handling the list items, and we used a React function called useState. useState takes in it takes in my initial value for my list items, and it takes in a function that manages the setting of those list items, so I can update the state over time. My initial value is now loading, and then what happened is I did something. I leaned on a React hook called useEffect. And what useEffect does is it waits until specified moment in time, and then it kicks off some function. So what happens is useEffect, when after a component is rendered, useEffect kicks off. And so what happened is we rendered our app component, and then useEffect kicks off, and it went to get records, and I went into the get records behavior, and I fetched my list of records from Kintone, and then for whatever my result was, I put them into my state.
Is
and so
useEffect basically the React version of promises?
No, useEffect is like an event hook. useEffect is like, I want something to happen at a certain point in time, and that point in time is every time this component re-renders. Do this thing.
It's almost like an on click, but for something else.
Yeah, it's on render. On
render. I see.
Or more accurately, Vasilios, it's after render.
I see. So hooks are basically after renders.
No, the useEffect hook is an initial, it instantiates when immediately after render happens.
I see. So it's like one of the hooks, like one
That's
of
right.
the types of, okay.
That's right. And then there's another hook called useState. And what that does is we basically lean on React magic to create a store of data that when it changes over time, a whole bunch of stuff can happen easily and without our concern, because React magic is sort of ruling it behind the scenes.
Yep.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah. What Will is saying is spot on. Hooks are just functions, but they run at certain timings. So it's basically like a combination of JavaScript events and functions. And React has hooks that come with it. They come for free. And one of them is called useEffect, and the other is called useState. And we've got some information in the slide deck about useEffect and useState, that you can review at your own on your own time. So I've got this get records behavior, and get records is a function too. And what this is it's a get function. Here I am getting my Kintone records. I'm going to my routing server at the specified endpoint, which if you recognize, hey, this is the get data route. This is what we were talking about before. Okay, from here, I'm going to that routing server is going to go to Kintone. It's going to fetch records. It's going to come back, and then I'm going to present them in a list. I've got the title. I've got the author. I've got a unique key. That unique key corresponds with the record ID. You'll notice over here I've got title, author, and record ID, these are our field codes that we created before. And so we're going into Kintone right now, and we are parsing this information and using it to render in React. Okay, we've connected our Kintone subdomain. We've understood the existing behavior, and we learned how React works here. Okay, so set list items needs to be used with the useEffect hook, right? In this particular case, Parna, yes, because what we want is after the app component renders, we want to kick off some behavior. Well, what's the behavior that we want? Well, first, we want to get the records, but React needs to show something in the meantime. That get records, that's where the promise behavior happens. That's where we're awaiting for some asynchronous behavior. So we need to render something until we get stuff back. And that's why we've got an initial value for this useState, because React demands that we set an initial value to show something while we await the results of an asynchronous response. Parna is saying, but where is the implementation of set list items? Yeah, very good question. What's happening behind the scenes in the magic land of React, Parna, is that this useState function, it inputs, it takes in an initial value and it outputs a two-dimensional, an array with two items in it. The first item is going to be the current value of the state, and the second is going to be the function that, when referenced later, is what's used to pass a value into the state. So set list items was just the name of a function that we created. We could have called it set stuff. And as long as we set stuff over here, React knows, oh, okay, set stuff, whatever I'm passing in is going to become the new state. We just did a lot of stuff explaining what's going on over here, the various different parts of the build. What I want to talk about now is our posting behavior, and I want to start in the back end. And so we're going to build a post route, and so think about what we need to do. We need to build a back-end API endpoint that's going to be waiting to listen at a certain endpoint to kick off some posting behavior. We then need on the front end, we need behavior to manage the posting of the function that will actually do the posting to our routing server. And then we also need to create an element that is going to, a component that is going to hold that post behavior, so that when we click on something, it will trigger that front end post record function, which will then go to our backend and we'll post a record to Kintone. What we're going to do first is we're going to go into our server, and we've got a section over here to begin our writing our path for our API endpoint for the post request. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lean on Express to create this app.post. And the first thing that it's going to be expecting is the name of the endpoint, which we'll call post data. The next parameter in this argument is going to be how cores gets handled, which we'll include over here so that the cross-origin resource sharing gets handled. And then we're going to have a callback. And so that callback function is going to be what happens once post data is reached. And so what we're going to have is the beginning of a function. And we need to begin specifying the body of our request, because we're going to be posting data. So we need some kind of a template for it. Folks, I'm going to give you the template. because because Kintone is going to expect the data to to appear in a certain way. And that body, that's going to be an object with a key of app and a key of record. The value of app is going to be app ID, and the record is going to have the following setup. Title is the key, and then that's going to carry an object with a, with a key of value, of which we're going to be passing in the title, and then author value will be passing in the author as well. We then also need to handle our options. So here we go, our options. And our method over here is going to be post. And our headers. So a lot of this is formulaic, folks. We're going to want to clarify in our headers our API token with a header named x-cybozu-api-token, and then to clarify the content type as well. And then the body is going to be a stringified version of the request body. And then what happens is when we get to this, when this function kicks off, we're going to fetch at single record endpoint, which we had defined above, and we're going to pass in our options. And then we're going to do some data transformation. Once we get that response, we're going to transform it into a JSON. Oops. Response. Parna, yes, this post data code is available on the repo branch called get_n_post. Get and post. So what you can do is, after our time here today, you can git checkout get and post. And then what will happen is all of your code will update, and you'll be able to see this new, like this updated, all the stuff that I'm writing. And then if you wanted to go back to your previous work, you would get checkout main, and then you can see that. If you want, you can also clone the repo into another folder and have two branches, and have one folder be on your main branch and another be on the get and post branch. And then what you can do is you can put both of the have both of those project folders be open in your code editor, and then compare and contrast the two on the split screen. Okay. Yep, you got it. All right. So that's it. That's what we got over here. What we did was we leveraged the use of Express to hook into an existing post function. The post function needs an API endpoint. It needs to know how to handle cores, and then it needs a callback function, which is going to, like, once this app.post is triggered, then we're going to post, and we need a body that's specified a certain way. We need options that are specified a certain way, and then we need to be able to handle the data transformation back into a form that our front end can digest. Okay, from here, we're going to now jump into our post record function in our front end. So now go to front end. Inside of the requests subdirectory, there is an almost empty file called postrecord.js. Okay, and postrecord.js, we need to specify how, like, what's the function that's going to take our data on the front end and push it to a routing server. Okay, so we need a few things handled. So first, we need the the add record endpoint. Now I'm just going to copy and paste. This endpoint is going to be used because this is what we're going to. This is like the address of our routings, the API endpoint of our routing server that we're going to be pointing this function behavior to. And now we want to pass the post API request from React to our Express server. So let's go ahead and start coding that. And what we want to handle first is our record body parameters. So title is going to correspond to, going to correspond to author. Oh man. And then author is going to respond to, is going to correspond to author. I'm using a little ES6 trick over here where when the name of the key and the variable name used in the value are the same, we can just use that name once. So title in quotes colon title is good. It looks we're doing the same thing with author. It just looks like this, leveraging ES6. Okay. Now let's define our options. So this method is going to be a post method, and the headers, we're going to need to pass in some headers over here. The content type header, which is going to be application.json. And this is like standard, like boilerplate for creating a post method. And then our body is going to be the stringified version of the record body parameters that we had set up here. So what we're doing, we're passing in the title, we're passing in the author, and we're passing it in, and we're setting up the payload. And then what we need to do is transform this payload once we receive a response. So what happens is we've set up these objects, and now what we're going to do is when this function called post record executes, we're going to fetch record and we're going to fetch to add record endpoint, and we're going to include the options that we specified above. When we receive a response, we want it to transform into JSON format. And we can even log that in the console. JSON.stringify, and we'll stringify the response so we can see that in the console. And then we'll return the JSON response. Kent, there when I copy and paste that site, yeah, everything else has been set up for you. All we need to do is we just need to add that API endpoint for that post behavior. And so what we've gotten right now is on server.js, we've added this this new hosting request, and we can save the file. On our front end side, we've added our post function, and we've saved the file. And so now we need to do something with it. We need a component inside of React that is going to handle our posting. Okay, so the way that we're going to do that is we'll go into app.js. And inside of app.js, we're going to create a new component. We're going to call it the input form component. Could you push the change repo later? Akeem, you should already have the change repo. It's available to you. You can check out the branch called get and post, and you already have all of this at your fingertips. Okay. So don't you worry, we got you covered. Okay. So we've got this input form component. right? And I want to think about this with you for a second. So we've got a component that's showing us our results, and we've got a component that we're going to be using to push new data to our Kintone environment. So the question is, how should our React, how should our front end respond? Get this, how should our front end react to changes in data once we're updating, once we're posting a record? Well, there are two answers to this, right? One, and yes, Kent, it should update in real time. Very good. That's ideally what we want. We want it to be able to update in real time versus waiting until the backend server, waiting until a whole circuit has gone from our front end to our back end to our database, back to our back end server, back to our front end. If we know the information we're going to be putting in, we should be able to see it up front. And there should be some sort of triggering behavior, like when I am posting, then my list of records should be updated as well. For this reason, we need to pass down state into this input form. I'm sorry, pass down props is what I meant. We need to pass down props into this input form that are going to be used. And so what we're doing over here is we're passing down the set list items function. So here's where stuff gets really cool. What we're doing right now is we are going to make the set list items function that's in the app component available to its child component input form. And once set list items is triggered in the input form, the state will change in the app component. And then the state having changed means that the props that are listening to this change in state will update and will re-render the component. Christopher, lifting state, that's exactly what we're doing. It's called lifting state. Remember, in React, data flows from the parent to the child. That's the only way that data flows, from the parent to the child. And so how are we going to pass data from one sibling component to another? And the answer is we don't. We use the parent component to keep the state and manage the state across its children. That's really cool. This is one of the key benefits of React. So what we want to do with this input form is we're going to start building it. Okay? And so the first things first is we're going to start importing relevant files. Okay? We're going to import relevant functions and files. So what we want to do over here is we want to import React. We want to import we want to import useState, because we're going to be using the state to trigger the change in state in its parent component. We want to import get records from requests get records.js. We want to import post record from a similar place, requests.postrecord.js. Okay, and now we've got all of that set up, let's start building stuff. So, well, it turns out that we're going to create a form over here. So you know what? Why don't we start with that? We're going to create a form over here. I'm just going to copy and paste the form that we're creating. Right? It's template code. This is, for the most part, boilerplate. Anything that's not boilerplate, I will explain. We're going to copy and paste the form because this is an HTML fragment that we're going to be returning. And it's a form. So what are we expecting? A title input field, an author input field, and a submit button. That's exactly what we see over here. We've got an input for title, we've got an input for author, and we've got a button where some behavior is going to happen on click. There's some other stuff in here that we're about to get to momentarily. Don't be frightened. This is all just handling the way data is moving around in this component. Okay. Now listen, we've got a form that's right over here. We could just have the form be have the data be submitted, and that's it. So just handle some kind of button click function that passes the data, like posts the information onward. But React gives us two ways to handle the passing around of form data. Okay, we're doing it in this particular way, where each of these inputs, basically, it's like each of these inputs has its own state in the component. Okay, so we need to create a state to handle title, and we need to create a state to handle author. And so what happens is when you type anything into either of these input elements, okay, what's actually happening is that React is interrupting, and it's saying, oh, you typed in a letter into this input element. Well, I'm going to keep that letter in my state, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to present that letter, I'm going to render that letter as the updated state of the input element that you're using. So it's like a man in the middle between your keystroke and the rendering of the new component. The rendering of the new input element with your keystroke in it. And so React is that man in the middle. It's interjecting, and it's saying, okay, well, the value that's going to be in here is going to be the value of the title state. The value that's going to be in the author input element is going to be the value of the author state. And when something changes in this input element, we're going to have some kind of handler function, which is going to update the state so that I can have this kind of man in the middle behavior. Okay. Well, it looks like we've got three functions that we need to handle: handling the title change, handling the author change, and handling the button click. Okay. We're going to draw the rest of the owl, so to speak, okay? And we're going to do it by, I'm going to punch in these functions all at once, and then I'm going to walk through them quite quickly. The button click function. So you think about it, right? I need to take a title and an author. I need to take the values of those inputs, and I need to send them to my routing server that's going to send them to Kintone that's going to send them back. So I need a post record behavior. We just built that. Post record took in the title and an author, and it's going to return something. So what I want to do then, what it's going to return doesn't actually really matter to me at all. What I want to do after I post the record is to get records, and then pass that new get records response into my list items. I'm going to update the state of the parent component with the new results, which will then update the props of my sibling component called list records. And so this is where this chaining behavior is happening right here. I click on a button, I pass my title and my author to my backend, I post the record. And then when the response is received, then I'm going to make another post request. I'm going to make another request. This is going to be a get request. And then I'm going to get the newly updated records. And then I'm going to take that result. I'm going to update the state of my parent component, which will then re-render the sibling component called list records. And then I'm going to get a new updated list. And that's what button click does. And then handle title change and handle author change is boilerplate for like when I key in a new keystroke, pull that keystroke value from this thing called event.target.value. This is React boilerplate. Okay, so we've just done a lot a lot of stuff. Let's see how we did. I've refreshed my React app. And I see I've got a title and an author and a post to Kintone button. So we're gonna type in, anybody have a favorite author, a favorite book? How about good answer, Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. I'm gonna post to Kintone, and if everything is working the way that I expect, I'm gonna hit this button, and something broke. Caught syntax error.
I think the server needs to be updated. So like killed and started again.
Thanks, Genji. Let's try that. I've just npm restarted my backend server. And so let's go ahead. Eagle-eyed Genji right over there. All right, let's try this again. So here we are now loading. Okay, we got records the first time. So title, Romeo by William, and post. Boom. There we go. All right, folks. The roller coaster is winding down. And you've just been on a roller coaster. There was a lot of stuff that we went over in the last 2 hours. Okay? What did we do? Well, let's take a look. We explored the React app. We learned about how the front end and the back end works together. So we then learned more about React with these hooks called useState and useEffect. We talked about props and how props get passed down always from a parent to a child, because data flow in React is always top down. We configured the Express server. We avoided CORS errors by making REST API calls from the server instead of directly from localhost to our Kintone environment. And then we added our input form, and we posted, and we got an updated list of records as a direct result. So there's a lot of information that just came at you. And if wherever you are in this process is perfectly okay, because you've got everything in your hands to put the pieces together. You've got a GitHub repo that you can use to change. You can check out a branch to the branch where this work is completed. You can compare it against what you've done. We've got an article series on React and REST API talking about how to render these responses, how to overcome CORS errors, how to get data from a web database. You've got our excellent documentation courtesy of Genji. Genji always 10 out of 10 for documentation. And folks, if the documentation is anything other than a 10 out of 10 for you, please reach out to us and tell us how we can improve, because I'm proud of the documentation that man builds, and it's magnificent. Your next steps. So you can try playing around on the front end, rendering this response into tables. You can add another post request, adding data into Kintone, calling a public API, or deploying your app to Heroku, as somebody has already shared with us. You can share your experience on dev.to. And if you're stuck, you can share your code on the Kintone developer community forum or on Stack Overflow. Okay, folks, almost at the time where we're doing our raffle. I'm going to turn it over to my man, Connor. Connor, take it away.
All right. So once again, we want to say thank you so much for your undivided attention, making it to the end right now. We really appreciate all of the attention, and just want to say that we value that. Another shout out to our community partner, HackBuddy by JavaScript. We always appreciate partnering up with them. And then, so if you guys enjoyed the content that we covered today, we have upcoming workshops. So stay tuned and join the meetup at bit.ly/KDP_events.
On behalf of all of us, thank you. See you later. Good day, good evening, good night. We're done.
Bye-bye.